Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel, where everything you're about to hear and see has been done in one take. I'm your host, the One Take Man. For today's video, I'm going to continue my look through the Wikipedia article on military. But before I do that, perhaps I should do a little recap first. I started by talking about my motivation for why I decided to do this, namely the fact that it's Military Appreciation Month, and a lot of people who claim that there should be one, you know, don't know that there actually is one, and some level of not being knowledgeable can be forgiven, but when that but however I had issues with the lack of knowledge being used as a being used as a tool to foment oppression and division, and I and I was quite savage in calling people out, and then I started going through the article itself, and and giving some of my comments throughout. I hope I was topical in doing so. Starting with the top, then going through etymology and definitions, then history, um, then organization. All of these subsections had a little bit to add on. Had a little bit to add with each of them, not just in terms of partly in terms of how they are presented, partly in terms of how the uh, real life things they describe actually uh, actually handle the actually handle this topic, and moving forward, some of my suggestions or thoughts concerning the concerning doctrine or how uh, uh, or how military goals are mapped out. Then we also talked about combat, and I started to realize that is really where I should have paused between parts 1 and 2 after logistics. So I would have a more roughly even uh, amount of the article to talk about in both videos. But regardless, I decided to go through the uh, victory uh, uh, through the ways in which victory is can be pursued and obtained, and again I made some comments on that, and now we're at technology, and then as part of society, the last two sections. It'll be very interesting to see how those uh, influence each other. So with that out of the way, allow me to continue. And of course, there is a separate main article revolving around that as well. And this section also has has a little template message here about how its sources are not particularly adequate. Never mind. Or okay, maybe someone should address this, but not me, because as I said, I'm not a Wikipedia editor, and I don't really think my time would allow me to take that duty on. Uh, I'm just gonna point at it, maybe maybe add some suggestions, and proceed. Talking about technology. As with any occupation since ancient times, the military has been distinguished from other members of the society by their tools, the weapons and military equipment used in combat. When Stone Age humans first took flint to tip the spear, it was the first example of applying technology to improve the weapon. Since then, the advances made by human societies and that of weapons has been closely linked. The advances has been, not good. The advances have been. Anyway, moving ahead. This has been a pretty consistent problem throughout this article about pluralization. Stone weapons gave way to Bronze Age and Iron Age weapons such as swords and shields. With each technological change, some tangible increase in military capacity was realized, such as through greater effectiveness of a sharper edge in defeating armor, piercing armor, you mean, or improved density of materials used in manufacture of weapons. On land, the first significant technological advance in warfare was the development of ranged weapons, notably the sling and later the bow and arrow. The next significant advance came with the domestication of the horses and mastering of equestrianism, creating cavalry and allowing for faster military advances and better logistics. True. Perhaps the most significant advancement was the wheel, a staple of transportation, starting with the chariot and eventually siege engines. The bow was manufactured in increasingly larger and more powerful versions to increase both the weapon range and armor penetration performance, developing into composite bows, recurve bows, longbows, and crossbows. These proved particularly useful during the rise of cavalry, as horsemen encased in ever more sophisticated armor came to dominate the battlefield. Speaking of, there is a picture of an arrowhead here, and of two knightly armors, one just standing and one on horseback, and the horse seems to be armored as well, which is always cute. Like, even though it's meant for a brutal purpose, I often find it to be cute. Okay. In medieval China, gunpowder had been invented and was increasingly used by the military in combat. The use of gunpowder in the early vase-like mortars in Europe and advanced versions of the longbow and crossbow with armor-piercing arrowheads put an end to the dominance of the armored knight. Of course. Gunpowder resulted in the development and fielding of the musket, which could be used effectively with little training. In time, the successors to muskets and cannons, in the forms of rifles and artillery, would become core battlefield technology. Truth be told, I would like to specify that knights weren't really that much more dominant. Weren't really that much dominant before compared to after the use of gunpowder. And by that I mean that most people still use spears and those kinds of weapons in combat, because actually being able to effectively use a sword was something you could only do if you were if you had a lot of time to be trained with the necessary skill. That means you pretty much had to be nobility, but most troops still relied on other weapons. The sword is very much only seen as dominant because their wielders were otherwise dominant within society, for a variety of reasons. Still in some ways the rise of gunpowder did still bring a meaningful development in the when it comes to military. So I'm not denying that. But perhaps saying that is what ended the domination of the knight is a little overly simplistic. As the speed of technological advances accelerated in civilian applications, so too did military and warfare become industrialized. The newly invented machine gun and repeating rifle redefined firepower on the battlefield, and in part explains the high casualty rates of the American Civil War and the decline of melee combat in warfare. Yep, that's kind of true. The next breakthrough was the conversion of artillery parks from the muzzle-loading guns to quicker breech-loading guns with recoiling barrels that allowed quicker aimed fire and use of a shield. The widespread introduction of low smoke or smokeless propellant powders since the 1880s also allowed for a great improvement of artillery ranges. The development of breech loading had the greatest effect on naval warfare for the first time since the Middle Ages, altering the way weapons are mounted on warships. Hence this picture here as well. Sorry about that. Naval tactics were divorced from the reliance on sails with the invention of the internal combustion. Of course, further advance in military naval technology was the submarine and the torpedo. During World War I, the need to break the deadlock of trench warfare saw the rapid development of many new technologies, particularly tanks. Military aviation was extensively used. Okay, initially it was simply meant as an extension to of scouting, I being able to perform reconnaissance from the air. However, eventually that people tried to mitigate that, and in turn that led to various, that led to the planes themselves becoming more active participants within combat, or rather more offensively capable tools in the hands of militaries. Next up. Military aviation was extensively used, and bombers became decisive in many battles of World War II, which marked the most frantic period of weapons development in history. Yeah, I'm not gonna deny that. Many new designs and concepts were used in combat, and all existing technologies of warfare were improved between 1939 and 1945. During World War II, significant advances were made in military communications through increased use of radio, military intelligence through the use of radar, and in military medicine through the use of penicillin, while in the air, the guided missile, jet aircraft, and helicopters were seen for the first time. Though, to be fair, helicopters only started, or rather modern helicopters, only started seeing use in were only fully successfully developed in 1944. So saying they were used in World War I is a little bit of a stretch. Most developments of helicopters, both for military and civilian developments, occurred after World War II. Where was I? Perhaps the most infamous of all military technologies was the creation of nuclear weapons. Yep. Although the exact effects of its radiation were unknown until the early 1950s. Okay. Far greater use of military vehicles had finally eliminated the cavalry from the military force structure. Not exactly true. Or rather, there is still an expression about how the cavalry has arrived. But if anything, I think the I think there is still the use of military forces with different levels of equipment, or rather equipment with different levels of either mobility or destructive output, has become somewhat more refined. So it's not like the cavalry has disappeared. It's more like it dispersed to the point where there are a wide variety of perhaps associations or groups that could be referred to as such. After World War II, with the onset of the Cold War, the constant technological development of new weapons was institutionalized. Yeah, of course, as participants engaged in a constant arms race in capability development. The constant state of weapons development continues into the present. Main battle tanks and other heavy equipment such as armored fighting vehicles, military aircraft, and ships are characteristic to organized military forces. The most significant technological developments that influenced combat have been guided missiles, which can be used by all branches of the armed services. More recently, information technology and its use in surveillance, including space-based reconnaissance systems, have played an increasing role in military operations. Yeah, of course. The impact of information warfare, which focuses on attacking command communication systems and military databases, has been coupled with the use of robotic systems in combat, such as unmanned combat aerial vehicles and unmanned ground vehicles. Recently, there also has been a particular focus towards the use of renewable fuels for running military vehicles on. Unlike fossil fuels, renewable fuels can be produced in any country, creating a strategic advantage. The US military has committed itself to have 50% of its energy consumption come from alternative sources. Okay, not gonna lie, this is kind of cute. But on the other hand, I think you remember the meme about a bomber aircraft which about or rather there's a meme that shows two pictures of a bomber aircraft, one on top of the other, and in one of the memes the bomber is just that, it has no decorations, and on the other the bomber has all kinds of logos like pride flag, BLM flag, etc., etc. But it still does the exact same thing. This is kind of what I'm thinking about when it comes to this. And truth be told, I recognize that the military actually has some level of functional utility, unlike other people I could mention with anarchistic leanings. But anarchistic leanings. So I think there is some merit towards updating it and making sure that it fits the standards that the rest of the industry is trying to set for itself. But nevertheless, when you consider those goals, the goals in general, it kind of seems oddly counterproductive. Or if anything, it looks like it's trying to improve, or like they're trying to improve its image in order to hide a potentially nasty side effect or consequence of itself. Speaking of, as part of society. For much of military history, the armed forces were considered to be for use by the heads of their societies, until recently the crowned heads of states. In a democracy or other political system run in the public interest, it is a public force. And public force is... okay, there's an article about that. I'm not gonna go too far into it. The relationship between the military and the society it serves is a complicated and a revolving one. Well, yeah, once it goes from the plaything of the rich and powerful to the plaything of the rich and powerful who pretend to use it for everyone else. It could be described to evolve, but however, the extent to which it actually evolves is questionable. I'll say, to put it politely. Much depends on the nature of the society itself and whether it sees the military as important, as for example in time of threat or war, or a burdensome expense typified by defense cuts in time of peace. That is a simplistic way of viewing it, and it only views the relationship in terms of how the military is supported by the general population, and does not describe. There are many other ways in which the military can interact with the civilian population. Actually, no, I wrote about a few of them. One difficult matter in the relation between military and society is control and transparency. Okay, someone actually knows something about that. In some countries, limited information on military operations and budgeting is accessible for the public. However, transparency in the military sector is crucial to fight corruption. This showed the Government Defense Anti-Corruption Index Transparency International UK published in 2013. Or rather, this was shown by the, by this anti-corruption index. Or the anti-corruption index has shown this, etc. Militaries often function as societies within societies. As I've said in the first part, not necessarily the brightest idea. By having their own military communities, economies, education, medicine, and other aspects of a functioning civilian society. A military is not limited to nations in and of itself, as many private military companies can be used or hired by organizations and figures as security, escort, or other means of protection where police, agencies, or militaries are absent or not trusted. Yeah, that's another aspect. And it's one that is a little bit too complicated for me to talk about right now. Ideology and ethics. Main article, militarism. Okay. No, no. And also there's this very, very nice picture here. A Polish Armed Forces M1 Abrams taking part in an Armed Forces Day military parade somewhere in Poland. The fact that Poland has M1s, M1 tanks is intriguing. Let's put it that way. Militarist ideology. Sorry about that. Militarist ideology is the society's social attitude of being best served or being a beneficiary of a government or guided by concepts embodied in the military culture, doctrine, systems, or leaders. Not sure why these are italicized, but going ahead. Either because of the cultural memory, national history, or the potentiality of a military threat, the militarist argument asserts that a civilian population is dependent upon, and therefore subservient to, the needs and goals of its military for continued independence. That is one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is to... Oh, no, I was actually thinking about a quote that proved the exact opposite. About how diplomacy is the extension of conflict by other means. But still, the fact that other means exist proves that there are other ways for a there are other ways for a society to sustain itself, and therefore reliance on military organizations is not directly or distinctly necessary. Yeah. Also, I already mentioned I'm an anarchist, so me being opposed to militarism should not be too surprising. Militarism is sometimes contrasted with concepts of comprehensive national power, soft power, and hard power. Okay, most nations have separate military laws which regulate conduct in war and during peacetime. To some extent, I recognize them being necessary. So I'm not going to talk too much about them. An early exponent was Hugo Grotius, or should I say Hugo Grotius, whose On the Law of War and Peace had a major impact of the humanitarian approach to warfare development. His theme was echoed by Gustavus Adolphus. Is he a Swedish king or something? Yeah, King of Sweden from 1611 to 1632. Credited with the rise of Sweden as a great European power. Yeah, I thought so. Major impact on the humanitarian approach to warfare development. Okay, that warfare can be deployed in a humanitarian manner is a little surprising, but not exactly, because maybe I'm mistaking humanitarianism for humanism, but still, it's about recognizing that your opponent is not just a beast, an enemy. There are more complex aspects to the way your opponent acts, and therefore said opponent's behavior can be influenced by factors other than direct martial influence. Or at least that's what I'm going to say about now. The ethics of warfare have developed since 1945, and they have developed before that as well, I have to say, to create constraints on the military treatment of prisoners and civilians, primarily by the Geneva Conventions, but rather apply to use of the military forces as internal security troops, but rarely apply to the use of military forces as internal security troops during times of political conflict that results in popular protests and incitement to popular uprising. So after the war is completed, the military can just stay in charge of a place and do whatever it wants with it, or whatever it wants in it, and the Geneva Conventions have nothing to say about that. Okay, this is not a bright idea. Moving ahead, international protocols restrict the use or have even created international bans on some types of weapons, notably weapons of mass destruction. International conventions define what constitutes a war crime and provides for war crimes prosecution for war crimes. It's likely not everyone who wrote this had English as their first language. But then again, even for me, English is a second language. And yet I am still capable of... And yet I can recognize that, so that might not be the best argument. Individual countries also have elaborate codes of military justice. An example being the United States Uniform Code of Military Justice that can lead to court-martial for military personnel found guilty of war crimes. Wait a second. There's a so question: does the Uniform Code of Military Justice is uniform in this expression a noun or an adjective? As in it applies in a uniform manner or general manner, or does it apply to uniforms? Because I don't think dressing badly constitutes as a war crime. Like, I can imagine some people being I can imagine some fashionistas thinking that, but they wouldn't really act upon that. Military actions are sometimes argued to be justified by furthering a humanitarian cause, such as disaster relief operations to defend refugees. Such actions are called military humanism. Okay. Intriguing. And perhaps not as in-depth as I would have really wanted to see, but then again, this is Wikipedia. It's trying to present it. Its policy does try to include at least the appearance of neutrality. However, neutrality is still defined in accordance to a certain ideological framework, and that ideology could be political, could be social, could be any other thing. So, regardless, I recognize that there are some things that it sets out to accomplish, and I'm not gonna stay here and grumble because it fails to live up to my preferred interpretations of those topics. And yeah, then there are see also a whole bunch of things about militaries, about armed forces, and the various references used all throughout. And yeah, various other Wikipedia specific stuff, which I will not go into. Anyway, this has been it. This has been me reading reading Wikipedia's article on military. Thank you for your attention. If you enjoyed following me throughout these two videos, then please like the video, maybe even share it wherever you think other people will also like the video. If there is anything you'd like to add, either to the article itself or to some of my reactions to it, that's what the comment section is for. And if you want to see when my next video gets released, well then please subscribe. Maybe also ring the bell or do whatever else YouTube will ask of you in order to keep you notified. I also have a main channel where I talk about book-related and literature topics, including the books I wrote, which I've mentioned both in this video and my previous. A link to that you will find in the description down below, right past my social media links, which I will suggest you check out should you choose to. Additionally, you have the option of supporting me on Patreon, where depending on the level at which you pledge, you will receive various perks, the specifics of which I will allow you to discover for yourselves. Until next time, I have been the One Take Man.